Cops of Reddit, what's the most bullshit sounding excuse you got that actually turned out to be true? One of the funnier ones that I remember. We got a call for a kid, he was 18 and a gang member, brandishing a firearm. He had pulled up his shirt pretending to brandish a firearm to intimidate somebody. The person calling only saw a holster. After we got there, he kept telling us it wasn't a gun but a dildo. We took him down at gunpoint and he was right. He was walking around with a holstered, black dildo. Why? Because he could. Ha ha. Had a domestic in progress I responded to during Christmas Day, and the excuse for them fighting was we're not mad at each other, we're just upset because we wanted to surprise the kids for Christmas, we got some deer, dressed them up, now they're destroying our house. Turns out there was literally 3 fully grown white-tailed deer in the house, somehow dressed with full bell harnesses like Santa's reindeer. I had to call the game wardens down, who were then able to help me remove the deer from the property without injury to us or them. How they managed to get the deer and dress them up is still a mystery to this day. Okay, so legit answer. One night I'm out working, and as I go down the street, fairly nice middle-class area surrounded by some high-crime neighborhoods, around midnight I see a dude on a bike, no lights on, pulling a lawnmower behind him on a rope. I immediately flip a 180 and light him up. Recognize the guy as a local homeless dude with some prior burglary/theft arrests. I walk up and just open with "Dude, come on." Guy holds his hands out and swears he didn't steal the lawnmower. Claims someone just gave it to him. I ask who, and he doesn't know a name. So I demand he tell me where to find said lawnmower owner. The directions he gave were literally go that way a bit, then right at a stop sign, and take one of those side streets that way. It's about halfway down a street, at a house that has a pickup and a car in the driveway. By this point backup had arrived, so I leave him in the presence of backup, and drive off in search of his mythical donor of lawn equipment. I made a decent guess as to the first turn, then flipped a mental coin as to which of the next 3 side streets he would have gone down. I picked the second of the 3 streets, and start down it. Every other fucking house has a truck and car combo. There must have been a dozen houses that match the description. Halfway down, I see an average-looking house and go, I'll try this one. After all, it's midnight and this is a wild goose chase. Go up, ring the doorbell, middle-aged dude comes to the door. "Hello sir, have you been giving away lawnmowers to random sketchy homeless guys at midnight today?" Yes. As a matter of fact, he had. Homeowner goes on to complain to me that his wife was upset as his continual inability to get the mower running, and had ordered him with some severity to remove the mower from the house or face the consequences. He pushed it to the curb right as homeless guy rode by, and the latter had asked and received his permission to take it. I drove back in shock and amazement, apologized to homeless guy, and sent him on his way. A few months later we ran into each other at a nearby gas station, and he told me it turned out just to need a new spark plug, and that he had gotten it running again, before going on to sell it for $150 to someone. For years after, whenever I would run into him, he would always make sure to remind me of the money he made from selling that stolen lawnmower. LOL. Not a cop, but my dad rolls cigars. He uses this white powder called vegetable gum to seal the wrapper. You mix it with some water and it gets sticky and clear. In powder form it looks similar to cocaine. My dad had a massive bag on him after a rolling event one night, and got pulled over for a traffic violation. They saw the bag of powder laying in a box and asked what it was, and my dad told them. I guess they didn't believe him because they called back up. They had my dad cuffed while they tested it, and sure enough it came back as not cocaine. They let him go. But it still cracks me up hearing the story. Not really an excuse, but shocked the shit out of me. I've always been told a diabetic with high blood sugar acts the same as someone who is drunk. Get a call for a car all over the road, hitting trash cans on the side of the road and whatnot. We stop the car and get the driver out. He's slurring his speech like no other, can't maintain his balance to save his life. Fails all the sobriety tests, but blew zeros on the PBT. He denied drinking and swears up and down he didn't do any drugs, never mentions the diabetes. We're all scratching our heads and I remember the blood sugar thing. Call medical to our location and sure as shit his blood sugar was 550, and he finally remembers that he hadn't taken insulin in 8 hours. My dad is an officer and he pulled someone over for speeding and running a red light and they said their breast implant burst. He called EMS to rush them to the hospital and turned out it did, and it's actually very dangerous if they leak. I used to work as a military police officer. I was working at the main gate one night and this guy tried to come on base, but he didn't have any ID other than a driver's license, so I couldn't let him on. The guy told me that a general said he could come on, but he didn't have any proof of that and he didn't know what the general's name was. It was also super late at night and he didn't seem to have any answers that would help us identify who he was. Long story short, the dude ended up being legit and was coming on base to be awarded a Silver Star the next day from the general. Was doing a tour as an MP, not my normal job, but whole other story, and we got called on a domestic. At the house, there is this huge corn-fed guy about 6 feet 4 inches and 275, and a petite Asian girl about 4'10" and 95 pounds soaking wet. The whole house was in disarray, and the call had come because of yelling heard by the neighbors. She was crying and talking in an Asian language that none of us understood, and kept gesturing toward her huge husband. He wasn't talking. We wrap him up, take him to the station, and are trying to interview him, but he's not saying much. We intend to charge him with domestic assault. We notice somewhere along the way that he has horrible welts all along the backs of his hands and along his forearms. It took a lot of prying, but we finally got out of him that his wife would beat him with wire coat hangers when she was mad, and apparently that was pretty often. He was too embarrassed to admit to anybody that he was being abused by his wife, who was less than a third of his size. We finally got it straightened out, turned her over to the local police, and barred her from base. Hopefully the guy got the help he needed. Not a cop. Family friend was. Pulled a guy over who was speeding profusely. Guy was obviously disheveled. He said he was headed to the hospital because he had a tick on his penis. Cop was confused, but he escorted him there, then waited in the lobby to check on him / see if he was blowing smoke. After a while, he asked the desk what was going on, why it took so long to take a tick off his penis. Her reply: "It wasn't on it. It was in it." Former cop here. I was behind a vehicle that couldn't stay in the lane, kept swerving, etc. It was 1 a.m., and I think another drunk idiot on the road. Pull him over. Guy is a straight-up asshole to me. Curse me out, yelling at me, and I notice his speech is slurred. I get him out to car, and I can smell a fruity smell on his breath and he has to lean against the car for support. I ask him how much he had to drink and he tells me to fuck off. By this point I'm ready to bring him in for a DUI, but I just had a feeling something wasn't right. I called EMS to come check him. Blood sugar was at 40. Not drunk, just a diabetic. If I would have arrested him, he probably would have died before I finished the paperwork. Go with your gut if something doesn't seem right. Popped a college kid for shitty driving and pulled 100 grams of weed off of him. Also, a 1-pound glass pipe shaped like a huge nail. No biggie. Also find weed under the other college kids in the car. Driver falls on the sword and tells me all of it is his and lets his friends walk free. I like this kid. However, during the search we find packaged addies in the cellophane of a cigarette pack with the top melted closed. God damn it, intensifies. Ask kid if he's stealing addies at school. Tell him I'm aware of the prescription pill epidemic. He says no and spins a huge yarn about how he only carries a few on him because Hess had his orange pill bottle stolen so many times. Kid seems like a pretty good dude. I decided to take the X-Files approach. Supervisor tells me pursue charges for dealing, blah blah blah. I tell the kid he has one chance to prove Hess telling the truth. Shows me the broken glass under his driver's seat from a vehicle burglary. Gotta do better. I follow behind him back to his dorm. He lets me in and shows me the busted footlocker he kept them in under his bed. Dunno. Kinda weak. Supervisor's telling me to hurry in and drop the axe. Tell him to do better. He calls one of the soccer team assistants up and we meet him in the locker room. Shows me the little wooden locker which has a broken lock. Assistant coach tells me they have replaced the lock on his cabinet 3 times. Campus security has numerous reports of medicine theft from this kid. Nice. I call supervisor up and tell him I have no grounds to pursue delivery charges. Poor bastard just kept getting his Adderalls jacked and being the big dumb meatball he was, he started packaging them like that. I end up talking to his best friend breaking up a house party a couple months later. Friend tells me kid is a stand-up guy who only uses weed due to extreme anxiety, Totally believable from my interaction with him, and has never sold anything in his life. Friend thanked me and told me his buddy spoke well of me. Friend also tells me he had to drive his buddy to the hospital a few hours after I left from a panic attack due to the whole incident. I felt bad for the kid. So now, whenever I see him smoking up in his car in the mall parking lot I just wave. Thanks for the gold, I'm honored, but it's not needed. Put it in a savings account. Money is a bitch to get, so hold on to it. If you have to part with it, donate it to St. Jude's Children's Research Hospital. They do good shit there. Not the cop in this story, but someone crashed into a tree on their way to work, and most people have an excuse as to why they weren't at fault when they crash. In this particular case, the woman said an owl flew into her car and she swerved off the road into a tree. Anyway, said cop gets into the car to move it for the tow truck, and sure enough an owl flies from the back seat past the officer's face and out the front window. Surprises the cop, scared the shit out of him I imagine. The owl was included in the diagram of the accident report. Not a cop, but I did get stopped by one for eating a taco. I worked at a community college in LA that had a high school right next to it. Well, there was a lot of drugs sold through the fence at the high school, so there was always a cops driving up and down the street between the schools. Couldn't get a parking pass since I just worked at the school, so I always parked on that street. Hit up Taco Bell for lunch and was sitting in my car eating my double-decker tacos, when a cop drove past. Next thing I know, he's flipping a U-turn and heading right for me. He slides to a stop driver window to driver window and yells at, "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Stunned, I just said eating my lunch. Well, he isn't buying it and says I'm hiding something. I just hold up my taco and looked so confused. He burst out laughing and peeled out. Saw him a few times after that and he always waved and had the biggest grin on his face. My first ever real call was for a flasher at the local park. When I got there and finally found him, it was a mentally impaired young man 16 to 17 who had a pair of headphones on and a full poop bear. I said, "Hey man, come here, what the hell is going on? You know you have to keep your pants on, especially at the park." He goes on to tell me he had bad itching down his pants and couldn't take it anymore, so he had to rip his pants off and was running home to get help. I said, "Man, you couldn't make it home first?" He said, "No, I had ants in my pants." As sure as shit, according to more than one witness's account, he had been sitting in a sandbox playing at the park and accidentally on a nest of red ants that had crawled up his pant legs.